So even though we've been counting down the draft for about 1,000 years, somehow time is fast forward because now we are just 3 days away from the 2025 NFL draft. And as our Jonathan Jones, our NFL insider, will tell you shortly, this is one of the most unpredictable drafts we've seen in the past handful of years. That said, JJ's been keeping his ears to the ground, trying to figure out exactly what teams are going to do when they're on the clock. And since it is Monday, it is our final mock draft Monday before we figure out who is actually getting their names called starting Thursday and where they will be going. So for more on that, let's welcome in our lead NFL insider, Jonathan Jones, the host of With the First Pick podcast, Ryan Wilson. We are going through JJ's mock draft, which up until even a couple hours ago, you were shifting some things around. We're going to start with the Titans at number 1. JJ, this is something that has not changed.
It has not changed. It won't change. It's going to be Cam Ward, the University of Miami quarterback, going number 1 overall to the Tennessee Titans. Like, could a team come up with a trade package that could potentially entice the Tennessee Titans to trade out of one? I assume it's possible. Hasn't happened yet. Yeah, they've gotten some calls, but not real offers. In fact, most of the teams that I have spoken to, a little bit of a spoiler alert here, a lot of teams that I've spoken to, they haven't gotten any real offers for any sort of trade up or trade back scenario. Just a lot of chatting, a lot of yapping these days, Amanda. But Cam Ward will be the next franchise quarterback of the Tennessee Titans. It's an obvious need. He is very obviously the number 1 quarterback in this draft. To every team that I've spoken to, I know there are some reports out there that Tyler Shuck is QB1 on some teams' boards. I have not spoken to that team or teams, but Cam Ward, without question, in my mind, will be the next quarterback of the Tennessee Titans. They may take the whole shot clock every single second, and I don't believe that Cam Ward has been informed that he will be the number 1 pick just yet. But we are here at CBS Sports HQ to go ahead and inform Cam Ward that he will be.
For sure, they're at least going to let it sit for at least 5 minutes. All right, so everybody has said that the draft starts at 2 with the Browns trying to figure out what they're going to do. They do need a quarterback. However, Jonathan, you are going with Travis Hunter. What is your confidence level in this, and how are they going to play him?
Yeah, I'm fairly confident in it. I mean, hearing general manager Andrew Berry talk last week, comparing Travis Hunter to Shohei Ohtani, the guy who should every year be the AL MVP, well, I mean, it sounds like you're going to take the guy who is at the top of a lot of teams' boards, right? I mean, this is a guy who has the stamina to play on both sides of the ball, certainly played on both sides of the ball in college for far more snaps than you would in the pros. Now, I don't anticipate whatsoever, based off of folks that I've talked to around the league, that he will play anywhere near that sort of both sides of the ball. And of course, the Browns have said very publicly for 2 months now that they view Travis Hunter as a wide receiver first and then as a corner. So, yeah, he's going to get his full helping of offensive game planning throughout the week, and then give him a couple packages, some obvious passing down situations. I could see him playing on both sides, just not 100% of the time. And lastly, Amanda, why would he want to be a wide receiver? And that's what I'm told, that while he wants to be considered as both, he wants to primarily be a receiver. Well, look at the money. Look at Jamar Chase at more than $40 million in average annual value, and then look at Derek Stingley, the highest paid corner in NFL history, at 30. And you consider there are 6, 7 wide receivers above Derek Stingley Jr. When it comes to average annual salary. Yeah, there's a whole lot more money in playing at wide receiver.
Ryan, I would like to point out we're 5 minutes and 15 seconds into the show, and it's our producer, Stryker, whose fault it is that you have not been able to speak yet. However, we're going to get you in the mix now here. Let's go to the Giants at 3. Another team that does need a quarterback. However, comparing both of your latest mock drafts, you guys agree they're going with Abdul Carter. Ryan, why that?
Hey, Amanda, good to see you. A couple things. This is not atypical from just a conversation I might have with JJ at a bar where he's just talking for 20 minutes. I just sit there and nod like I appreciate what he's saying. So that's one thing. And the other thing, we all know, no one can live on $30 million a year. So, yes, you have to ask for the $40 million a year deal if you're Travis Hunter when you become wide receiver. As to what we're doing here, talking about the mock draft and JJ's mock draft in particular, I do love that there's a lot of pushback on this thing. Last year, he had an absolute grand slam with what we had in Michael Penix Jr., so that's worth keeping in mind. For the Giants here, it's Abdul Carter, and I think that is exactly what's going to happen. And JJ certainly knows more than I do in terms of talking to teams. But the teams I spoke with, it's going to be if Abdul goes 2, then Travis is going 3, and that's going to be the turning point there. I know that the Giants have had conversations about Shedeur. It's unclear, or maybe it is clear, that they're split on those conversations, and it feels less likely to happen than perhaps what we thought coming into the Combine, for example, back in early March.
Shedeur Sanders is definitely the name to keep an eye on as we move through this first-round mock draft. That is JJ's. JJ, let's go to the Patriots at 4. And what's interesting is you said even if Abdul Carter is available in this spot, the Patriots are still going to go with Will Campbell.
Yeah, so remember, Abdul Carter only visited with 4 teams, and it was the top 4 teams that are out there. And so in that very, very unlikely scenario that happens, wow, maybe Abdul Carter falls to a team that he did not visit with. I'm also here to tell you that I don't really envision a world where Abdul Carter is really available to the Patriots at 4, so it kind of doesn't matter. But here we are with Will Campbell. It's a very obvious need, the offensive line. This was one of the worst rosters in all of football last year, right? Mike Vrabel comes in. They've already started redecorating there. They went a little crazy in free agency, would have even gotten more guys into New England if they could have outbid even more folks. But it's pretty obvious to a lot of folks around the league that A, they need a tackle, that B, the pick would be Will Campbell over Mimbu, who is considered by many to be the second offensive tackle in this year's draft. Obviously, people have varying opinions. But with Will Campbell, you don't really worry too much about the arm length. You watch him play at LSU. 33 inches, is it 32? Is he closer to 33? All the measurements were off, right, Ryan? Like from Senior Bowl all the way through Combine. It's weird. We've never really seen something like that before, but I think the Patriots would be very comfortable taking their left tackle, the future Will Campbell, there at number 4.
And Ryan, I know you've said many times you are not worried about his arm length. You have him going, I think, in the same position as well. Let's go to the Jags at 5. You guys actually differ here. Ryan, your latest one I saw going with wide receiver Ted McMillan. And JJ, you're nodding your head at that. JJ's going with Mason Graham, defensive lineman out of Michigan. Deep D-line class, Ryan. What do you think about it?
Yeah, Mason Graham makes a ton of sense here, and this could actually be what ends up happening. It wouldn't have happened in a Trent Baalke draft because the measurables that we just talked about, Will Campbell, even though Mason Graham's a special player. But our buddy Pete Prisco's mentioned Ashton Jeanty as a possibility here, and he's the mayor of Jacksonville, so he has some insights there. And I went with Ted McMillan, again, to give Trevor Lawrence some help. But they need help in the interior of that defensive line, and it would make sense for Mason Graham to go there. If he doesn't go here, he might slip 4 or 5 picks at the most, and that can be worth watching. But again, this feels like a chalk pick, and the fact that JJ is talking about it makes me feel even like it's more likely than not to happen, even if they have other needs on the opposite side of the ball. Whether you go offense here and then defensive line at the top of the second or vice versa, I think those are the 2 positions that wide receiver, running back, and defensive line, those are the 2 positions we're going to see the Jacksonville Jaguars target with those first 2 picks.
It's been rare to see him below 5, and like you said, maybe 10, and that's about it. Let's go to the Raiders at 6, and I got to know, are you hearing something? Both of you guys are agreeing on this. JJ, you have them selecting running back Ashton Jeanty out of Boise State. What can you tell us?
Yeah, late last week, kind of going back to Ryan's earlier point about the Jaguars, I started hearing a lot of Jeanty to Jaguars noise. Look, so far, I would say that my mock has been a little chalky, has been a little consensus. I don't like that. I don't like that on the Monday before the draft, through the first 6 picks in this unpredictable draft, right? We're all saying it. We don't really know what's going to happen. Yet here I am feeling very confident about the first 2, 3, 4, 5 picks. I don't know. I want to throw some cold water on my own one and only mock draft. But when you have the Las Vegas Raiders, you have a team that desperately needs playmakers. We're going to talk a little bit later about the wide receivers that this team needs. But in this mock where Ashton Jeanty is available to the Raiders at 6, where you need home run hitters. And this guy, I mean, you talk about 50-plus yard runs. Didn't he have double what the number 2 running back in the nation had last season? I mean, he is absolutely a home run hitter, someone that a lot of teams believe in. I am not a huge fan of drafting running backs in the top 10. I'm not a huge fan of paying running backs a great deal of money. If you ask me what sort of school I subscribe to, it is the running backs are fungible, more or less. But we did just see that there can be difference makers. And I'm not saying that he is Saquon Barkley, because he does leave some things to be desired when it comes to catching the football out of the backfield, maybe a little bit of pass blocking. But NFL coaches know that they can teach up a lot of that. Was he really required to do that? All of those things in there, the Raiders start to need some playmakers, and I don't know that you're going to get a better playmaker than Ashton Jeanty at 6.
Really quickly, and we do have to get through all 32 here, but are you worried, JJ, about the miles on him? Because, I mean, he was their entire offense pretty much every single play.
Yeah, I'm not, only because he's on the rookie contract, right? Now, once we get to the 3rd and 4th year of his deal and we start talking about, should you give him a long-term contract? That's where I'm going to start to worry about the mileage. But in a rookie deal, that's not something I'm too concerned with.
Let's go to the Jets at 7 here. Ryan Wilson, you're up. JJ did debate a tight end here in Tyler Warren. Instead, he's going with protection for Justin Fields and Armand Mimbu out of Missouri, offensive tackle. What do you think about this?
Yeah, the Tyler Warren thing is interesting because that is a huge need there. I love Armand Mimbu. He's one of my favorite players in this class. He's my offensive tackle, too. We heard JJ mention that. That is true. I do love it. I'm at the point where I've fallen in love 400 times. And I've yet to have my heart broken, though, Amanda, so there's that. He's only 20 years old. To JJ's point, he has 34-inch arms. So he can do everything you want him to do on the right side next to Elijah Vera Tucker. You drafted Olaf Ashnu last year on the left side, and you're getting your offensive line in order. The only caveat, and I had Mimbu going here in my mock draft as well, I do wonder if Aaron Glenn is going to be looking for his next Brian Branch type player and whether he would take that player in the top 10. That's something to keep an eye on. But Mimbu feels like the smart pick here, even over a tight end like Tyler Warren.
You like Mimbu or Jalen Walker better, Ryan?
I love them both equally.
Okay, all right. What a good dad you are, because Jalen Walker is next going to the Panthers at 8, according to our Jonathan Jones. JJ, no, nothing is locked in until their name is called. Is this close to a lock, maybe?
Again, I feel weird saying it, right? Why am I so confident in the first 8 picks here? I shouldn't be. I'm sitting here telling you, it's almost like the Blues Traveler song Hook, where they're telling you that this is a catchy song and you know, the entire verse and chorus is like, you shouldn't find this to be a catchy song, but it is, and you're going to keep repeating it. You should not believe this mock draft, guys. It's too chalky. It's too consensus. But believe me. Okay, and so Jalen Walker fits a very obvious need for the Carolina Panthers, okay? They clearly need pass rush help. They've needed it for a little bit. They have kind of tinkered with the offense, really going back to last draft, and now it is time to focus on the defense and specifically the pass rush, something that they couldn't really get figured out in free agency last year. It's time to get some guys, some young guys under contract. Traded away Brian Burns when they decided not to pay him. And look, there's a lot of things you can do with Jalen Walker, who a few years ago, we probably would have called him a tweener. But now in today's NFL, throw him out there, let your coaches figure out what the heck to do with him. And also, he interviewed off the charts with every team that I have spoken with. So you're getting a high-character guy, a guy who has been at a high major program, who knows what it's like going up against the best competition. This seems like a very obvious pick for Carolina.
Any defensive player out of Georgia, I'm going to give a thumbs up. And I will say, as we recap here, JJ said in his article, despite that unpredictability, I did develop some irrational confidence in going through his draft. As you take a look at 1 through 8, only one quarterback off the board. The Browns locking in Travis Hunter, Raiders going with Ashton Jeanty, and the Jets get protection for Justin Fields. Coming up, Mock Draft Monday continues with information from our insider, Jonathan Jones. Cowboys are beefing up their offense, but is it in the way you think? We'll have that answer coming up. Welcome back into Spotlight here. We are here with Jonathan Jones and his irrational confidence in his latest mock draft, which, by the way, you can find at CBSSports.com. We're going to pick it up with the 9. Ryan, you have the odd numbers here. It's the Saints, and so many people have floated the idea of a quarterback, specifically Shedeur Sanders, JJ going with OT Kelvin Banks Jr. Do you think the Saints actually pass on a QB here?
I do think so. There's a real possibility, and JJ should be very concerned because 8 of our 9 picks in my mock draft that came out today and his are the same. So that's concerning for him, less so for me. But the Kelvin Banks thing is interesting. Yeah, for real. It's interesting for this reason. You talk about they need a quarterback because of the Derek Carr situation. They do have Spencer Rattler and Jake Haener. both of whom went winless last year, I believe, in their starts. But they also need help at offensive line. Trevor Penning hasn't worked out as a former first-round pick, and neither has Ryan Ramczyk was very good, but he just retired. So you got to sort that out as well. I think that's more important right now, fixing the O-line and perhaps getting a quarterback in round 2 or trading up back into round 1. And then Shedeur is going to slip. And now the question becomes, Amanda, how far does Shedeur fall?
Yeah. That is the question, Ryan. Thank you for saying that. Sorry, you caught me off guard. I was reading the next pick in the draft is the Bears. And the reason I was reading about it is because I'm reminding myself, look, the Bears can go a lot of different directions. This offseason, like, their number one focus has been the offensive line. Ryan, I think you have them taking an edge rusher here. JJ are going with tight end Tyler Warren. Why are you going in that direction?
Yeah, I think that they like him. I think a number of teams do like Tyler Warren. I think he's absolutely in play for the New York Jets. A few picks earlier. But if he is available at 10 to the Chicago Bears, I think that they are going to rush up there to try to get him. This is about building up that offense. They've been a very aggressive team so far in free agency and in this offseason under Ben Johnson. And when you consider Tyler Warren, a number of teams have him as the best tight end in this draft. I've talked to a couple who have Colson Loveland. But when you have a Tyler Warren, yes, they have Cole Kmet. Well, for the time being, they can do 2 tight end sets. And then if they want to move on from Cole Kmet and have a guy on a cost-controlled rookie deal, well, you can do that. And the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles did just that with Zach Ertz, then drafting Dallas Goedert. And so there is some precedence here for doing that. I think the Bears would be very happy getting the best tight end in this draft at number 10.
The Bears could go in a lot of directions at 10, as could the 49ers at 11. They need a lot of help. And it's interesting, JJ notes in his article that this next pick, he's going with defensive lineman Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss, is a little high. Ryan, is this too high for him? And how do you like the fit with the 49ers?
Strictly on field, I think this feels about the range. Right, 15 maybe is where we start to talk about Walter Nolan. There are some maturity issues, and teams vary in terms of how much they take that into consideration. But on the field, Walter Nolan's special, and the 49ers need a ton of help along the defensive line. He reminds me a little bit of Javon Hargrave in terms of the twitchiness with which he plays, and I think that's an opportunity for him to make his way into the middle of the first round. So this wouldn't surprise me, given all the needs the 49ers have here at 11, even if perhaps we're waiting another 4, 5, 6, 7 picks before we start to feel like we might hear Walter Nolan's name called on actual draft night.
Go to the Dallas Cowboys at 12, and this is a name that I've been saying a ton. Matthew Golden, wide receiver there, just has to move a little ways up to get to Dallas. JJ, I'm curious. I have friends that work on the radio and sports radio in Dallas, and they have this mock as well.
Yeah, so look, consider this. They have CeeDee Lamb, and they don't have wide receiver 2. Now you have Matthew Golden, who runs a 4.29. So now you have the speed opposite CeeDee Lamb, right? That's going to be an undeniable element of Brian Schottenheimer's offense. Then let's also consider what he was able to do this past year in the games that mattered, in the SEC Championship, the college football playoff, where he was a game changer in every game that matters, right? And so he played at a big school, goes up against big teams, and plays big. And then lastly, the simple fact is the Dallas Cowboys have watched him for some time, right? Back when he was at Houston, now at Texas, you get the speed, you get the wide receiver. Look, the Cowboys have a few places that they can go here. And would anybody be surprised if they take a wide receiver and it's Tet McMillan and not Matthew Golden? Sure, I'll allow it. But in this mock, I have them going with the local guy, the speedster, who fits a very clear need, who plays big in big games.
Just right up the road on I-35 there. Stop and get a kolache. Let's go to the Dolphins at 13 here. They're really good, by the way. I'll tell you where to go. And it's interesting that JJ is going with offensive tackle Josh Simmons. Maybe not interesting in that manner, but he is coming off a knee injury, had to have surgery. Ryan, are you concerned about his health?
It's not an ACL, it's a patellar injury, I think. So that's a little different than what we typically talk about in the recovery from ACLs, which we feel a little bit more comfortable about in the media at least. But if Josh Simmons is healthy, he is every bit a middle of the first round pick or potentially higher. Transferred from San Diego State, and he looked really good until he got hurt in that Oregon game. Unfortunately, he didn't get an opportunity to play against some of the bigger teams on Ohio State's schedule down the stretch. But I was at his pro day a few weeks ago, and they let him do a little warm-up. without a knee brace, and he looked as fluid as you can look for 6'5", 315 coming off surgery, and I think he got teams' attention for that reason. So if he's cleared medically, this feels about the range. Teron Armstead retired, so they need help there. Yes, they have Patrick Paul. Yes, Josh Simmons doesn't have to play right away, so maybe you figure things out maybe in the middle of this season, or maybe circle back to 2026, give him a redshirt opportunity in Josh Simmons, and then figure out what you want to do with him next year, because he's a first-round talent, no doubt about it.
Coming off my knee injury, I have ice on my leg as we speak and go through this mock draft. We get to the Colts here at 14 in JJ's mock draft. And JJ, I loved your little note on this. I actually didn't know it, that GM Chris Ballard is one of the tallest teams, and he is going with a very tall tight end that fits into the mix for them. But Colston Loveland's been tied, and correct me if I'm wrong, he's been tied to the Colts for a while now?
Yeah, I believe so, and it's because they clearly need a tight end. You believe that Tyler Warren is the number one tight end. You believe he's going to be gone by the time the Colts pick, but who really needs a tight end before that? And so Colston Loveland is going to be available to them. We'll see if that winds up taking place, but look, he's 6'5", and it's crazy. Like, Chris Ballard absolutely has a type. He really likes tall football players, like at almost every position. I remember looking at this a couple years ago and like, oh my gosh, the Colts in the top 3 in terms of like average height in the NFL, something like 7 of the past 9 years or something like that for their opening day rosters, week 1 rosters. And so all of this starts to make a little sense, right? They lost Kylan Granson in free agency, and so they have that need there. And so that's why I'm sending Loveland to Indianapolis.
Let's go to the Falcons at 15 here. This is a team that does need an edge rusher, and JJ's going with that in James Pierce Jr. How much do you think the Falcons, Brian, are going to be working off their board at this point to find the best fit?
Oh, if they're going off their board and they're going on-field productivity, this is where you take James Pierce. He might even go higher than this. Again, if you're just strictly talking about the football player, the issue is the off-the-field stuff, and some teams, and JJ can probably confirm as much, some teams have him off their boards. Other teams have brought him in for 30 visits. So that's the disparity that we have every time about players this time of year who do have the potential red flags. But on the field, man, he is special. 6'5", 250. He actually plays bigger than that 250. He's long arms, obviously, because of that height, and he got after it at Tennessee, both as a pass rusher and against the run, and he's exactly what the Falcons need on that defense. The question is, how comfortable are you, whether you're any of the 32 teams, taking him this high? Because, again, football-wise, he checks every box. It's going to be the off-field stuff that teams have to sort through. And some teams, as I mentioned, have decided to pass on James Pierce Jr. in the first round. But if the Falcons take him here and he's where he needs to be off the field, this is going to be a really good selection.
All right, it'll be interesting to find out what happens in 3 days. Let's go to 16. Normally that would be the Cardinals. Instead, JJ, you got a trade going down. The Seahawks, who are at 18, moving up 2 spots to land a wide receiver. Explain to us why and how this goes down.
So Cardinals GM Monty Ossenfort, he is always open for business when it comes to the NFL draft. And so and when I was creating a mock, I wanted him to trade back, but not too far, right, Ryan? Because there aren't that many first-rounders or blue players in this draft. So I can't have him go back 7. I can't have him go back 9, just a little bit. And it's an in-division trade, somewhat rare, but we're seeing more of those these days. And you have the Seattle Seahawks coming up to get wide receiver Tet McMillan. Again, I will not at all be surprised if Tet McMillan is not available at this point. But you have a Seattle Seahawks team that no longer has DK Metcalf, who brought on Cooper Kupp on it was a 3-year contract reported, probably closer to a 1.5-year deal, and then a we'll see more or less. And so you have this big, tall receiver who, you keep him out there in the Pacific time zone. And so that is what I have the Seattle Seahawks coming up just a little bit. Not that they have to be afraid that the Cincinnati Bengals would take a wide receiver when they're picking next. No, it's not about that. It's about a team. Look, this is a trade back draft, right? You're going to hear it over and over. So at any point, a team can trade back. And so you're feeling good that Tet McMillan is still there. At that point, go ahead, trade a little bit with a division rival. Make sure you get your guy who makes life hell for your division rival for years to come.
I will point out, I'll give Ryan's podcast a little plug here. If you want to hear cranky Pete Prisco and why he does not like Tet McMillan, head over to With the First Pick podcast here. But recapping 9 through 16, the Saints skipping a quarterback, and Shedeur Sanders, he is still on the board. They go with an OT. The Bears taking the first tight end off the board. The Colts follow up with another tight end as well. And the Seahawks making a trade up, not too far, as JJ pointed out, just 2 spots to land Tet McMillan. So coming up, that does lead us to Arizona. Now trading back, they have the 18th overall pick. Who do they take after trading down? We'll have that answer for you coming up. Welcome back into Spotlight. We are flying through Jonathan Jones' latest mock draft. Let's pick it up with 17 in the Bengals. He has them taking offensive lineman Tyler Booker. Ryan, this is interesting. JJ said he had him going a little bit later initially, made some calls, and realized that Booker needed to be a lot higher.
I love it. And I won't say what I was about to say next about Tyler Booker. I love him too. But this makes sense. Look, they need help along the edge rush, especially with the Trey Hendrickson situation. But Tyler Booker's taken some hits in the media because he had a poor combine workout. Just watch him play at Alabama. He is absolutely dominant. And then you have Amarius Mims from Georgia, last year's first-round pick. And then you have Tyler Booker. And then you can have a quarterback in Joe Burrow who isn't picking himself off the ground 15 to 20 times a game. So even though you need edge rush help, edge rush is deeper than offensive line, and there's only one Tyler Booker. I would absolutely take him here. I have no issue with this pick, and if it happens, that's great news for the Bengals and bad news for the rest of the AFC North.
I think you need some friendship bracelets for all these guys, Ryan. Like, just all the people you love on the draft. We're just going to get you those Taylor Swift friendship bracelets. There you go. Those don't look as cool, though. At 18, Arizona traded back, made a trade with Seattle. Seattle moved up to 16 to get Tet McMillan. JJ, what does Arizona do at 18 now?
Look, in my mock where I had him trading up or trading back, look, that actually may not happen if Michael Williams is still on the board. I admit that freely. He's a guy who has interviewed well, but look, this is a team that, again, they had some injury misfortune last year, especially on the defensive side, especially at pass rush. They have spent some premium picks on pass rush each of the last 2 drafts. But they do it again right here, going Michael Williams to the Cardinals, getting another pass rusher, really fortifying that front. And so that's my pick for the Arizona Cardinals.
We go to the Bucs at 19. This is a team that did try to get a corner in free agency. They whiffed on that, so JJ has them selecting cornerback Will Johnson. Ryan, what grade would you give this?
I would give it an A. And Jihad Campbell has been the popular selection here, the off-ball linebacker from Alabama. But they need help in the secondary for the reasons you point out. And the thing with Will Johnson is 2023, coming out of that season, he was my favorite player over the summer. Had turf toe injuries in the fall, didn't run because of a hamstring injury, didn't run at all during the pre-draft process. So there's some questions about how fast he is. But in 2023, he looks fantastic. And this almost feels like a steal for the Buccaneers at this point in the draft if you get the 2023 version of a healthy Will Johnson who is big, who is long, who has ball skills, and can play that Todd Bowles type physical defense that he likes to play.
The Broncos are on the clock at 20, and this is a very interesting pick for both of you guys. Ryan, in your mock draft, you said the Broncos, look, they do need a running back, but the class is so deep that they should wait until later. And JJ, you're saying that they may in fact trade up to go ahead and get the running back that they want, and that's what you have them not trading, but you do have them selecting running back.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is a chalky mock draft. Everyone seems to have the Broncos taking Omarion Hampton, the great Tar Heel running back. Thankfully, Ryan Wilson and his infinite wisdom does not. And look, I absolutely agree with that sort of thought process. Go get a running back later. What did we talk about earlier? Running backs are fungible. But they do really like Omarion Hampton. And there he is. And the rest of the NFL knows that they like him. And so that's where I say they may need to trade up, because if you get to this pick number 20, and the Tar Heel is there, it seems like he's going to be wearing the Orange Crush jersey here pretty soon.
I like that jersey, though. It's a really good jersey. Let's go to the Steelers at 21. Your Steelers, B-Max Steelers, Ryan Wilson here. And I want to quote JJ in his article, if you're waiting for a quarterback to be drafted here, keep waiting. Instead, he is going with defensive lineman Kenneth Grant. Ryan, what do you think about the Steelers skipping on a quarterback at 21, instead going with D lineman?
This is the rare instance
Shedeur
where
Sanders
it
is
feels
still on
like
the board, I should say.
Shedeur Sanders would be chalky, but Kenneth Grant has also been chalky. So you can have two chalky picks for the same team. But as JJ notes, if they're not in on a quarterback, whether it's Shedeur or anyone else, Kenneth Grant makes a ton of sense. And you could actually make a pretty easy argument that Kenneth Grant will be more impactful in the first 2 or 3 years of his career than Shedeur Sanders might be should Shedeur go to a place that can't support a quarterback because the offensive line stinks or the wide receivers stink, or he's just in a bad situation. So I understand this. I'm supportive of it as a Steelers fan. I do also wonder with the quarterback situation, how that gets resolved in Pittsburgh, whether it's Aaron Rodgers or elsewhere. But Kenneth Grant almost feels like the safer pick because can come in right away and be there with Keanu Benton and Cam Hayward and bolster an defensive line, that struggled down the stretch last year.
You called it a safer pick, Ryan, but if you're a Steelers fan watching the draft and Shedeur Sanders is there, are we going to be hearing upset Steelers fans at this point?
There's mixed emotions when it comes to Shedeur in Pittsburgh. It's an interesting dynamic. I would be fine with Shedeur there, but I would understand as well if they wanted to go in another direction. So we'll wait and see. I'm okay with it, but I do want to know what the answers are going to be at the quarterback position.
22, we find the Chargers. It is interesting. So a Michigan guy gets drafted before Jim Harbaugh is on the clock, misses out. Instead, edge rusher Shamar Stewart. JJ, you pointed out in your article he does need to be coached up. So what makes him attractive at this position?
Yeah, cruel world where the Michigan man gets selected right before the Michigan man gets on the clock. But Shamar Stewart, for me, it makes sense for the Los Angeles Chargers because they clearly need edge rush help and they need youth at the edge rush position. Bosa is now gone. They decided that they would keep Khalil Mack, but you need to get someone young there. Shamar Stewart, the issue with him, of course, is he never put together a season where he had 2 or more sacks in a season. He was always around the quarterback, but he just wasn't finishing. And if there's something that I believe in the NFL, it is the ego of NFL coaches. Just let me get my hands on him. We'll make sure that we turn him from a 1.5 sack guy into a 10 sack guy. And so he has the tools, he has the traits, he is sniffing the quarterback. Now the coaches just got to get their hands on him so that he can get his hands on the quarterback and get him to the ground with the ball in his hands. So that's why I have the Bolts taking Stewart there.
The Packers are now on the clock at 23. And JJ said, I had one coach called Jahdae Barron, who has them taking cornerback. The best defensive back in the draft, JJ, just nod or shake. Can you tell us if that was a Packers coach? Okay. No? Okay.
I can't tell you.
That got through you a little late there. Ryan, what do you think about this selection? Do you like Jahdae Barron to the Packers?
I love it to the Packers, and he could be a top 10 pick. Like, he is truly Brian Branch with better times during the pre-draft process. He's that sort of player. And you might say, well, they don't need a nickel in Green Bay. He can play outside, and Jared Alexander's future is in doubt in Green Bay and looking towards the fact that he may not even be there. So if Jahdae Barron's here, and he ran a 4.39 at the combine, he actually plays that fast. This feels like the type of pick you'd want to make in a hurry to make sure you weren't dreaming. He's a special player. We talked to him at the combine, and this kid loves football. He knows what every single person on defense is doing in addition to his roles and responsibility, and that translated in the interviews he had. Teams loved him. So, yeah, home run pick here if he's here at the bottom of the 1st round.
Normally the Vikings would be on the clock next. Instead, JJ, another trade. We're far from finished with these trades, and we're already at 24 here. The Bears trading their 2nd-round pick to move back into the 1st round here. They took a tight end earlier, JJ and Tyler Warren. Explain to us this trade, because also the Vikings only have 4 picks in this entire draft.
Yeah, so the Vikings are going to have to collect some picks somewhere, and the GM there, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, the last couple of years has not been shy about trading within the division, and now you have an aggressive Chicago Bears team. We talked about their aggression earlier in free agency, going out and getting Joe Thuney and Jonah Jackson, and so I see that aggression continuing for, frankly, a position of need, right? You have the top safety on the board in Nick Emanwari, but you also have a guy that, man, when you look at him at 6'3", well put together, can do a lot, can play really any sort of safety position, traditional or unorthodox in today's game. When you consider that Jaquan Brisker missed so much of the year last year. Look, I know that a lot of people want them to go maybe edge rusher here somewhere along the defensive line. I happen to think that the Chicago Bears may feel pretty decently about what they have around and beside Montez Sweat, and so that's why I have the Bears trading back up Thank you, Carolina Panthers, for that extra second-round pick, coming up and getting the South Carolina safety here.
Look, I'm telling you, if I'm a Bears fan, I'm loving this draft so far for them. Maybe they'll just pay attention to your mock, JJ. Another big trade goes down in JJ's mock draft. The Bears bulking up their roster using their second-round pick to get safety Nick Emmanwori. The Packers also working on their secondary by selecting cornerback Jahdae Barron, who Ryan says would be a home run if he is still there at that position. And the Steelers not going with a quarterback. Coming up, 24 picks are in and only one quarterback has been selected. So is Shedeur Sanders now falling completely out of the first round? Picks 25 through 32 are next. Going through NFL insider Jonathan Jones' latest mock draft. Find it on CBSSports.com. At 25, he has the Texans taking inside offensive lineman Gray Zabel. They could use him in multiple ways. The Rams at 26. JJ wanted to give them a quarterback, instead has them taking linebacker Jahad Campbell. The Ravens taking Donovan Ezraku. That's a guy who has shot up draft boards, especially since the postseason, or especially since the regular season ended, and the Lions going with a guy that JJ says Dan Campbell will absolutely love in Josh Connerly Jr., offensive tackle out of Oregon. We go to 29, and we have your third trade here. I'll tell you, there are 4 totals. So we still have one more to go here. The Commanders have the 29th pick, JJ. They trade back to 35. Titans move back up to 29 to get wide receiver Luther Burden. Ryan, what would you think about this?
This is a groundbreaking result for Brian Callahan, the second-year coach, and new quarterback Cam Ward, because if you look at that wide receiver room, one thing it lacks is explosiveness, and that's exactly what Luther Burden III brings. His 2024 wasn't as good as 2023, and Amanda, you actually saw him in 2023 in person when Brady Cook was healthy, and when the quarterback's healthy, Luther Burden can do things from the slot. He can play outside. He has kick return ability. As it stands, it's Calvin Ridley, it's Treylon Burks, a former first-round pick who has yet to work out, and Van Jefferson. So solid NFL players. One's been around a little bit in Calvin Ridley, and then Luther Burden comes in and gives Cam Ward a legit weapon that he could utilize from day one. So I love this pick. I love the idea of helping out the young quarterback. They went out and bolstered the offensive line in the draft the last 2 years and then in free agency this year, and now you're helping up the skill position players to help that young quarterback.
Yeah, and Ryan, one of the thought processes that I had here, look, the Tennessee Titans picking at the top of 2, they don't need a quarterback anymore. They've waited and waited. You know the talent of Luther Burden III. There's probably, and you've said it very eloquently about some other players, about some off-the-field concerns. And so now's about the time. I think his talent would get him drafted certainly earlier. But in this mock draft, I have teams coming back into the first round to get the wide receivers, the difference makers that they believe in. And so in a number of mock drafts, you might see folks say, oh, you got to come back up into the end of the first to get quarterbacks. In this mock draft, it's about coming back into the top of the first, just a couple of picks to get your wide receiver.
We go to the Bills at 30, and JJ says the Bills are a team that could potentially make a move and trade. Instead, going with cornerback Maxwell Harrison. The Chiefs at 31, they need offensive line help. And instead of waiting, they go with Donovan Jackson here. And at 32, to end the first round, the Eagles making a trade. Howie Roseman never afraid of making a trade. And you have the Raiders moving back into the first round. JJ, explain to us how this trade goes down.
Again, they need playmakers. We talked about it earlier with Ashton Genty at 6. They need wide receivers. There's no question at all about it. They have Jacoby Myers, Trey Tucker, and then a host of others. And so you may find that Emeka Egbuka could be a little duplicative to a Jacoby Myers. I don't know. I think that this is a guy who has absolutely impressed across the NFL in this pre-draft process. You are going to find someone who is absolutely a pro's pro in the Ohio State Buckeye. And so I see the Raiders, again, making that quick move up. Could they make a move up for a quarterback right here? Absolutely. Could they stand pat at the top of the second? Absolutely. But man, if he is still on the board and available before you get into Friday, I think somebody might have to come up and get Egbuka.
A lot of trades going down in Jonathan Jones' latest mock draft. 4 of them, 2 of them in the final 4 picks there, with the Titans moving back up to make a trade with the Commanders at 29. They get wide receiver Luther Burden. The Eagles moving down out of the first round, and the Raiders moving back in to take wide receiver Emeka Egbuka, who would be a slam dunk pick if he is still available at 32. You've officially made it through Jonathan Jones' latest mock draft. You can find it on CBSSports.com. 4 trades going down. But, JJ, more than that, I want to start with Shedeur Sanders falling completely out of the first round. You mentioned several teams that could potentially take a quarterback. Why are they all skipping on him?
Look, he could go at 3 to the New York Giants, right? I mean, really, his range is 3 to 36, right? I mean, and that's a huge range, and it's crazy, but there is a great amount of uncertainty about these quarterbacks. And look, there are a number of teams that I've talked to, teams that are not interested in taking one of these top quarterbacks because their position is solidified, who kind of tell me, look, we got a second-round grade on Shedeur. But we know that teams get desperate. Sometimes they overdraft players. Or, look, Ryan, how often do you hear it in your travels? Like, it only takes one. It only takes one team that has to love a player in order to take him. And so I don't know that it's going to happen at 9 with the New Orleans Saints, but could it happen when they pick at the top of the second? Absolutely. Could it happen at 21 with the Pittsburgh Steelers? It absolutely can. And in my mock draft with all of those trades, again, at the end of it, I had guys coming up for wide receivers. Could they come up for quarterbacks? Could they come up for Shedeur? Could they come up for a Jackson Dart or Tyler Shuck or Jalen Milroe? They could do all of that. I would just say this. We always say, Ryan, that, look for the teams to come back into the bottom half of the first round so that they get a quarterback so that they can get him on a 5th-year option, right? That's what you get when you are a first-round draft pick. I'll just say that even though we say that every year, it actually hasn't happened since 2018 when the Baltimore Ravens came back into the bottom of the first to get Lamar Jackson at the end of the first round. And so it's just one of those things that we all say. I get texted about it all the time, but it actually just hasn't happened in several years. Again, will not at all be surprised to see Shedeur Sanders' name called on the first night of the draft. Just in this mock, a number of circumstances take place where it's not.
And that could very well happen on draft night. I mean, Ryan, you've put together, about a zillion mock drafts at this point. I mean, do you think, how realistic do you think it is, maybe put a percentage on it, of Shedeur Sanders not making it in the first round?
Just percentage-wise, off the top of my head, maybe 10 to 15%. But here's the thing, in JJ's mock draft, he had 4 trades, and those trades were to move up and down for players that filled a need for those specific teams, in which case that continues to push players like Shedeur Sanders down, because as we've talked about, between 10 and 20, a team doesn't need a quarterback as the draft board is currently constituted. And if the Steelers go defensive line help, and then we're having that conversation again about the rest of those teams, maybe the Rams at 26, but the Steelers nor the Rams have second-round picks, so they're not going to trade back up unless they give up a king's ransom into round 2. Maybe some of the teams like the Browns or the Giants or the Saints who pick within the top 40 picks in round 2, maybe those are the guys that are going to think about moving up. I think there's probably, like if you do the math there, 80% chance that Shedeur does go in round 1. But in that 2022 class, Amanda, Kenny Pickett went 20th overall, and then the next quarterback didn't come off the board until the 3rd round. And we, in the media, tried to talk ourselves into maybe 2 or 3 quarterbacks going in the 1st round. NFL teams got that right. So we'll see how NFL teams feel about these quarterbacks after Cam Ward, because there's a ton of variability with Shedeur, with Tyler Shuck, and of course Jackson Dart, who we've talked a lot about as well.
Yeah, a lot of these teams falling in love with particular quarterbacks, but waiting to get them. JJ, the way that your draft does unfold, though, it's very interesting. The Browns with the first pick in the 2nd round, could they potentially, instead of making a decision between Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter at 2, end up getting him right there at the very top?
Yeah, they absolutely could, right? Just because you got Joe Flacco or traded for Kenny Pickett doesn't mean that you can't take a quarterback with your 2nd-round pick. Look, the Giants still sitting there. You have the Raiders. Just because they went out and got Geno Smith doesn't mean that they cannot come up and try to leapfrog the Cleveland Browns, right? In my mock, I have them coming up at the end of the 1st for a wide receiver. Everybody knows that the Browns could. If the Giants haven't taken a quarterback, everybody knows the Giants could. And so the end of that 1st round is going to be very, very interesting.
Well, as JJ said at the top of the show and the top of his article, one of the most unpredictable drafts we've had since about 2020. Ryan Wilson, by the way, the host of With the First Pick podcast, they go through all 7 rounds. Don't worry, it's not all in one episode. But you can pick which round you want and find out what your team is going to do on that podcast there. It is absolutely interesting and comical. I'm Amanda Guerra. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, 3 days away until the NFL draft. Keep it right here for the very latest.